Hello everyone, and welcome back to our overview of Barbarians of Lemuria, featuring Conan Exile's gameplay. Now, there are a few things that say... Oh wait, no wait, there aren't any. Okay, let's just move on to the next chapter, Path to Glory. Now, this chapter, while it may share the same name, or at least have a similar name to a Dragonbane module, and Dragonbane is another of my favorite tabletop games, it actually is basically the chapter explaining how to actually play the game. Now, I'm not going to go in-depth into the gameplay rules because, well, I want you to get the game yourself. So, not going to go too in-depth. I am going to explain some basics. So, Barbarians of Lemuria is performed... Wait, hold on, let me... Alright, Barbarians of Lemuria is performed with 2 dice... Sorry, not performed. Is played by with 2 die 6. Primarily. So you roll 2 die 6 and add any appropriate bonuses or penalties, which can vary depending on the success chances of it. Or rather, no, sorry, how difficult something is. If you roll over, like, if I remember right, 9 or so, it's gonna be checked. Oh yeah. If you roll over a certain amount, you succeed. 9. 9 or higher. If you roll 9 or higher on the final number modified by bonuses and penalties, then you succeed. If you roll lower than it, then you fail. Yeah, modified by bonuses and penalties, of course. So, and they do have a table of all the various difficulties if you need help figuring something out. So anyway, Now, I should note that the Everyone system, which is basically, as well as actually some other spin-offs, so Everyone is the generic version of Barbarians of Lemuria. And there are some spin-offs like Honor and Intrigue, and I think these rules actually come from the post-apocalyptic spin-off of it, Barbarians of the End, or Aftermath, can't remember which. But anyway, the main point I'm getting at is that Barbarians of Lemuria... Okay, so I'll just get straight to it. I was going to go over this with character progression, but I'm not sure when we'll get there. So might as well now so I don't forget. Barbarians of Lemuria is mostly made for short-term games, like campaigns that only run a few sessions. Or, for example, campaigns that are a bunch of different, that are just like one-shots. Now, you could potentially run a longer campaign because of the with some of the advancement rules. Like, there's nothing saying, like, you could, for example, like, so Barbarians of Lemuria's normal advancement rules is that you get experience points at the end of every adventure. So if you have a bunch of really long adventures, you could have a longer campaign with a lot less progression. However, there are other alternatives. Namely, instead of 2 die 6, make the dice you roll 2 die 8, 2 die 10, 2 die 9, or even 2 die 12. And when you roll those amounts, you increase the chances of success as well. Hell, you could even go up to 2 die 20 if you really want. But I'm not sure if you have to go that high. But in any case, even if you don't have to go that high, what this does is this makes if you're increasing the number you need to roll to get to success the right way, it would, as well as the critical success and failure numbers, and you can find charts of this in the various books that I mentioned, as well, Barbarians of the Aftermath, I think, and online, as well as in Everyone. It'll basically mean that you're increasing the odds, the number you need to roll to succeed at something, but you're not increasing the actual odds of success. However, it means that in order to get more meaningful results, you'll need progression will need to go differently, as in, you'll need to get your skills up higher for them to have more of an impact, thus extending the lifespan of a game and making Barbarians of Lemuria more viable for long-term play. Of course, you might end up having to increase some other stuff too, like the difficulty of certain enemies and monsters. From what I found from people online, this is, like, you do get very powerful this way, but not necessarily too overpowered, though you are meant to be a legendary hero anyway, so... But yeah, like, so there are ways that to increase Barbarians of Lemuria stuff that are, campaign time that are perfectly viable. And now, automatic successes. A roll on a 12 means that you have an automatic success. And so a roll of 12 means an automatic success. And on top of that, if your roll of 12 would have been a success, regardless of what you whether even if it wasn't an automatic success, that was worded weirdly. If a roll of 12 would have been a success, regardless of whether or not the automatic success rule was a thing, then congratulations, you have a mighty success, which details will be explained later. And if you spend roll a 12, get a mighty success, and spend a hero point, well, congratulations, that's a legendary success. And with this will have its own results as well. So, moving on from that, we have task modifiers, and there's a whole table of it that corresponds to certain missile fire ranges. So yeah, you basically have various different possibilities of hitting something depending on the range, and it corresponds to various amounts that you could potentially roll with the automatic with that stuff. Yeah. Now, hero points. So, hero points are basically the sort of meta currency. I think I described them before, but there are a few things you can do with them, and to give you some idea, I'm going to reveal a few of those. Not all of them, but just a few. So, one of them is a twist of fate. This is basically where if something was not established by the GM, you can spend a hero point to modify the scene. So, I think that this is actually similar to how fate points are used in certain other games, but not exactly the same thing. But I'll use a modern example to illustrate this point. Let's say you're playing a game and your characters are in a bar. You could potentially spend a hero point to make it so that, for example, the bartender has a shotgun under his bar. So if there's a gunfight and one of your characters takes cover behind the bar, well, the shotgun's right. You can pick up the shotgun and use it as a weapon. Yeah. Another thing that they could do is it's called Splintered Shield, Shattered Sword. And what this basically means is that your character can decide, instead of that, if they say took a hit, were about to take damage from a hit, instead of killing them, the hit, well, it broke their sword or broke their shield instead, like their weapon or their shield. I actually would highly recommend this for cinematic campaigns, because you see in movies all the time that a blow comes in and takes out a character's weapon. And there is some truth to it. Weapons broke all the time in real life. Like, they could get pretty durable, but the durability isn't infinite, so to speak. Now, mighty and legendary successes. So, a mighty success can do stuff like increase the amount of damage, like allow for, well, you to attack an enemy immediately after, disarming someone, stuff like that. Legendary successes basically allow you to have multiple mighty successes. It gives you the option to select two. So, obviously, very good advantage. Now, you can also do stuff like, there are also other rules here that I'm going to skip over a bit. But now, let's talk about combat. So, in Barbarians of Lemuria, unlike many other tabletop games, NPC initiative value is basically worthless, since, the NPCs aren't even given initiative. But basically, NPCs are categorized into three main categories: rabble, villains, and toughs. And I'll get through them when we get to the section on NPCs and NPCs and GMing. But basically, rabble are the weakest NPCs, toughs are in the middle, and villains are the strongest. And what happens is, players roll in Barbarians of Lemuria 2d6 plus 9 plus, 2d6 to attempt to reach 9, and add their mind score, their initiative, and any modifiers they might have to it, whatever those may be, positive or negative. And depending on whether they succeed, get a mighty success, or get a legendary success, it determines in which order they'll act, relative to the guys they're fighting. So to give one example, if a character fails, they act before everyone else except rabble. They act after everyone else except rabble. If they get a success, they act before everyone else. And there are other rules for greater successes that, once again, I'm not going to reveal here. So now, movement and distance. Okay, Barbarians of Lemuria, movement is not handled in abstract terms, is the best way to put it. Like, oh, this is a friendly area. Neat. Kitan. Cool. Anyway, so movement is handled in abstract terms. You don't need to necessarily, say, a chart that basically goes, oh, hey, your character can move X place and these things, or can move X place in X places. And they don't need necessarily a big battle map with exact movement.
Greetings, one. I suspect an interesting and winding.
Yeah, if for example your character is like in an area, let's say they're in an open field, they can presumably move just about wherever they want to. And if the character is, say, in something that's more restricted, then you can give more restrictive movement options. Generally speaking, if you need to get somewhere more important than someone else, then you should make an agility task roll with perhaps some careers to get there before them. Aside from that, combat is basically abstract to whatever the GM thinks is reasonable. That being said, while it is abstract, Barbarians of Lemuria still gives rules for grid-based combat, potentially, if you really want to do it. So yeah, it's not necessarily what the game intends, but you can do it if you want, and that's perfectly fine. Now, resolving attacks. So attack rolls are basically the same as other rolls, except, well, you subtract the target's defense as a specific modifier. Now, oh, hold on. Okay, yeah. So generally speaking, you roll agility to deal to see if you hit an enemy. Now, so that's generally it, regardless of whether you're using a melee or a ranged weapon. Though, that being said, there might be exceptions where you could potentially use strength to roll. But you roll this, and if you succeed at passing the roll's difficulty, at the difficulty, you hit the enemy. And from there, you deal damage. Now, how much damage do you deal? Well, it depends on the weapon. Brawling and improvised weapons do die 3 damage. What's the difference? Well, if you have an improvised weapon, like a chair, you can add your full strength. If you just have a brawling weapon, you add half your strength rounded down. So if you have a 1 in strength, you would do no damage with brawling. But with say, an improvised weapon, you would do... Well, I mean, you wouldn't get any damage bonus is what I mean. You would do damage, roll 1 die 3. And with an improvised weapon, you would basically get to, well, like I said, add your strength bonus. Now, with light weapons, you add half your strength. You add your full strength for melee, or half your strength for ranged, and the same is true for medium and heavy. And like I said before, the difference between light, medium, and heavy is, generally speaking, light rolls 2 die 6 and takes the lower, medium rolls 1 die 6, and large rolls 2 die 6 and takes the higher. But there might be practical reasons why you would prefer to take, say, a light weapon as opposed to a medium or a heavy weapon. Like, for example, if you're a thief and you need something that's concealable, or that can be used when acrobatics. Now, Careers, generally speaking, do not give bonuses to combat, but that being said, there might be some exceptions. They are detailed a bit here and in the careers section, but to give an example, let's say your character has the soldier career and is fighting in formation. That might give them a bonus to attack. Or a barbarian career, and they're fighting someone who isn't used to the ferocity barbarians are capable of fighting with. In that case, they might get a bonus to their hit roll. Now, there are other combat options that are given. So, combat is, now, once again, the combat in this system, to explain it, is fairly simple. Then the reason is to keep combat quick and brutal, as per the sword and sorcery genre, generally speaking. So, you can allow or disallow the other combat options if you want, and these include two-weapon fighting, defensive stances, full defenses, offensive stances, and all-out attacks. And that was the chapter, and you know what? Alright, also attempting to bypass armor. And that was the chapter, but I don't think I want to be done yet, because, that was a fairly short chapter. And so I think I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is on warfare and naval combat. Yes, this system has warfare and naval combat in it. This game really has everything you need to play a sword and sorcery game. So anyway, warfare. So, first off, land battles. And this is also could comprise sea battles that have a lot of different ships in them. But for now, they have a lot of different ships in them. If there's a few ships, you'll use the general sea battle system. A lot, well, you'll use the system that that I'm about to go over. So, now, first off, they go over the nature of warfare in Lemuria, and you can just go ahead and adapt this to whatever setting you're playing in. Because, this is more setting specific to Lemuria, which I'll probably go over Lemuria more when we get to the actual section in the game on it. But anyway, they also talk about the rate of march. Talking about infantry, cavalry, foot soldiers, various other factors like this. It's the general stuff that you need to know for logistical reasons. Now, the composition of armies. So, I will go over this a little bit, but basically in Lemuria, armies are generally speaking drafted peasant foot soldiers, very cheaply armed, with some more elite forces also present. Cavalry present as well. Lemuria doesn't have horses, but does have cavalry options. Now, and they also have chariots, war elephants, basically. Now, next up, sorcery on the battlefield. Generally isn't used in Lemuria, but that being said, exceptions exist. Now, sorcery is generally not used for some reasons that have to do mostly with Barbarians of Lemuria's story and such. So, and I'm not going to get into that too much right now, but just know that most magic spells are, well, this will make more sense when we get into sorcery, but most magic spells are not that useful on the battlefield. Only more powerful ones are viable for use in warfare. In those cases, they can help quite a bit. Now, battlefield rounds. So, each round in hand-to-hand combat might last, say, a few seconds at most. Whereas a round on battlefield combat could represent much longer times. It could be a few hours for, say, a large pitched battle. Or a few days or even a few weeks for a siege. Or perhaps even months for a siege. It depends. And, now, combat in Barbarians of Lemuria, as per the simplified system, isn't really done, isn't done with things like miniatures on a large board or anything like that. It's more focused. Well, not more focused, that stuff can be plenty focused. What's the right wording? Oh yeah, it's more focused on the heroes. So, first off, each army will have an army rating that's compared to the enemy army. it's all relative and based around how much better your army is than theirs in what regard. Like, is your army better trained? Is your army bigger, and how much bigger is it? What's their positioning? Do they have more supplies, better equipment, stuff like that? And what's their commander's ranking as a soldier and such? And what sorcery spells were cast? All this stuff feeds into their army rating. And then the commander will will have a dice pool based on this, and both sides will roll. So both sides' commanders will roll, and the difference in their results will become victory points. Whichever side gets 10 victory points first wins. But note that regardless of who wins, the heroes will always survive. So, yeah. So basically, the player characters always survive the battle. And actually, this is even if they lose. And actually, there are a few Conan stories that start with him being the last survivor, or at least a part of it, of him being one of the last survivors of a battle that did not go well. So, yeah, I think that's a good rule that really fits with the genre. Anyway, so, now, heroes, the player characters, can influence how the battle goes. They get various battlefield actions that they can do between rounds. So, for example, on the simple level, they could, say, inspire some of the soldiers to fight harder, which could get a bonus or something else like that. Now, on the other hand, now they could also say go over and kill the enemy sorcerer if the enemies have a sorcerer on the side to undo whatever magic they do that the sorcerer cast. Could also, for example, destroy a bunch of enemy buildings or something. Destroy something valuable the enemies have, like an important siege tower. Could potentially be taking an important position. Could potentially be, say, rescuing an important VIP. Now, warfare at sea is basically the same as warfare on land, at least on a surface level. So, and the surface level part is, that's the wrong, okay. Warfare at sea. The basic system is the same as warfare on land if we're talking pitched naval battles. You might have to modify some of the things the heroes can do, but aside from that, it should be the same. However, if there's a small amount of ships, or even just 2, then the ships have their own stats. And yes, you could play an entire pirate game using Barbarians of Lemuria. In fact, Honor and Intrigue, which is a spin-off of Barbarians of Lemuria specializing in swashbuckling, would be pretty much perfect for a Pirates of the Caribbean style game. Now, they include ranges at sea, as well as various priority roles, and various things you can do for sea battles. Like, for example, ramming an enemy boat, using a catapult on your boat, shooting missiles, boarding, stuff like that. And they also include rules for fighting sea monsters, and how they interact with naval combat. And yeah, there are some things that are big enough in like the bestiary when we get to it that can damage ships. And they also give rules for, like, repairing ships, or these are meant to more be basic repairs at sea that the crew is desperately doing to keep the ship from sinking, than a more structured repair, for example, that would be done in a port. Now, ships have their own stats, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but there are things like crew, how many people are on board, how many oars it has, the hull, which is its lifeblood, what damage they do if they ram it, and resources, which is the ship's ability to perform actions. So, and after that, the book gives examples of various ships that could be applied to many settings, like, for example, small sailing ships, war galleys, and things that are about the size of the Spanish Armada. Now, Barbarians of Lemuria also includes more rules for skyboats, which are a bit more high fantasy than typical sword and sorcery, but aren't completely out of the genre. And yeah, that's basic overview of the chapter on war as well as the chapter on playing the game, so thank you all for watching. Thank you for watching, everyone, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe.